Why did you get into crypto?
As a design engineer, I played with a smart contract code and I was kind of hooked.
My first exposure was through Coinbase.
MIT's Bitcoin Club.
Because I had a friend who worked in VC and he was like, dude, you should check it out.
He was showing the protest in Ukraine.
I was doing research in machine learning with a professor at Berkeley.
I'm mining Ethereum in my dorm room.
My co-founder got into crypto in 2014 when he saw Satoshi's paper and bought his first Bitcoin. I got into it after talking to him.
Powered the people, man. You know, I came into college 2011, right after the Egyptian revolution, and was thinking about ways in which I could provide people with economic opportunities. And the big part of that was infrastructure, which is heavily monopolized all over the world and is extractive. That's what got me interested in building community-owned infrastructure pre-crypto. And then when crypto came along, it was like, duh, this is the most obvious application of it to allow people to organize and create networks and transact with each other, send information without even having to trust each other. It was a no-brainer for me.
I first learned about crypto in sort of 2016, 2017, when I was actually working as an employee at a startup that did a lot with sort of live streaming, mobile gaming, and consumer social in the early days of those technologies. And at the time, I was really curious. We were learning about Ethereum and how people were starting to build applications with it, but we ended up not pursuing that direction. We explored Ethereum a little bit, but sort of put it on pause and then ended up working at Lyft the next 3.5 years. So there was sort of that spark of curiosity a long time prior, but I never really got to dig into it as a builder. 2 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer, when I met my co-founder, we were exploring together different ideas, different spaces. At the community, we were part of South Park Commons. Blockchain was sort of having a big moment. A lot of the smartest builders in the room, it felt like, were talking about the applications. Some were really excited. Some were, really against it. And I feel like whenever there's sort of that degree of contentiousness, I want to really get to the bottom of it and understand it.
I studied computer science and math in college, but I was also interested in the Great Depression. So I took 8 economics classes. So I always have been interested in financial crises, but I was really crypto skeptical until last year, actually. I contracted for my friend's startup as a design engineer. And they really pulled me into Cosmos in particular. That's how it all began. As a design engineer, I played with a smart contract code and I was kind of hooked. I just started building dApps from then on.
We were definitely bootstrapped by speculation. We started trading in college together.
DeFi summer was an exciting time, right?
Yes. So definitely started trading, just sort of the two of us, hunting on a lot of different coins. The thing that really clicked, I think, for both of us, making sense of the space and what the ultimate value add was this idea of digitally native property rights. I think we were both by nature rather libertarian, hence the sort of economic discussions in class. And property rights are fundamental to any market-based economy. I think in a pre-digital world, many of those were sort of clearly defined, or the tangible aspects of property rights were very clear. If you owned a physical, it is very clear that you own that. In a sort of digital world that we shifted towards, property rights have been eroded. There's no real digitally native form of ownership. And I think that was sort of the missing piece, the first thing that really clicked for both of us.
At an even more deeper level, I think that freedom and autonomy ultimately comes from ownership. And so I think that's probably one of the core drivers of our beliefs here and why they're so aligned with the crypto space.
I think it solves a real problem that we've seen and that we've tried to solve, and a lot of fintechs try to solve, which is how do you get money from A to B? And the way things work today in the financial industry is there's a lot of people that need to intervene for a transaction of value to happen. And when you look at crypto, where you have this decentralized ledger, where money and information are traveling together in the same transaction, it really solves a lot of problems. It really makes it 10x more efficient. So for us, that's what crypto is. It's a really good way to get money from A to B.
In my last company before Chamverse, I spent a lot of time studying Amazon, Zappos, and how they run companies, how do they run distributed team. And when I got into crypto and started talking to different DAOs, I really feel like that's the difference between having a blockchain and token power communities and scaling different kinds of distributed communities.
One friend that is futurist told me about Bitcoin in 2012 when I was doing my PhD in complexity science. And I thought blockchain was a very useful way to manage complex systems. So that's how I entered the rabbit hole.
And after that, in 2018, he introduced me to the crypto world. He said, "Me, do you have time? I have an idea." And since 2019, I am 1% crypto worker.
I got into crypto in 2017, originally because I had a friend who worked in VC and he was like, dude, you should check it out. This is a new trend. And this is a new technology. And started looking more into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I started trading initially. And then from there, basically really fell into the rabbit hole and started a dev shop, helping other builders build wallets and NFT marketplaces.
I used to trade CSGO skins. I'd figured out that there are these gambling websites for gambling your CSGO skins. And you used to be able to deposit Bitcoin on those sites. I didn't know what it was before then. This would have been back in 2014, so really early. And I guess that's how I found out about Bitcoin. Didn't own any at the time. And this friend of mine who I traded CSGO skins with and played it with each other, he was like, there's this thing called Ethereum coming out, or it's coming out soon, you should buy some. It's like Bitcoin, but better. That was all I knew. And then I bought it 2014, sold it for nothing. And since then I've kind of come and gone, but decided to stay recently, yeah.
For me, it was all the idea about freedom. I was not 18, I couldn't open a bank account, but I was selling stuff on eBay, and that was the only way I could receive money from overseas. So it was really about, having the possibility of having money and save and spend it.
For me, actually, it was completely random. So I heard this guy that, was talking about Bitcoin. I was passionate about technology. I was studying finance. So I said, okay, this could be interesting. But, the real, let's say, moment that made me do the click was in DeFi summer of 2021, which is when I actually started to use and, to transfer funds and, to buy investment products with that. And then I said, this is, something big.
Early mobile gaming, which is how I started out programming. I was just making iPhone games in my own bedroom when I was 11. And back then, the App Store was very new and also very small. I could just put apps on the App Store and people would just download them. Whereas today, if you were to launch a Web2 application, you'll have to do things like buy ads or measure your customer acquisition costs, measure your churn, and everything in between, which can be also counterproductive to the vision of the product you have for yourself, because the margin for error is very small for building in saturated fields. But in crypto, on the other hand, we need more applications, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
A friend of mine from MIT started MIT's Bitcoin Club back in 2013-14. And that is how I got to know crypto at first. I actually also almost joined Coinbase very early on when I started the company. After I stopped working on my first company, I joined a venture firm. And at that venture firm, I helped my colleague look at some crypto deals. And at the end of my tenure at that venture firm, I just always had this idea that, hey, I want to try to come back and build another company. And the reason why I decided to go all into crypto space was because I just realized that I really want to be able to work on a product, technology, and be in a space that has a high chance to make impact on a much more fundamental and systematic level. And that is really what blockchain and crypto is all about. And that's why I'm here.
I had worked at companies that had an investment from Union Square Ventures. So I was at Wattpad, I was at Twitter, and then I ended up at Coinbase. And USV and Fred Wilson and Albert there are really early in the space. They're big proponents of crypto in general. And I followed Fred Wilson's blog, and every day he would be talking about really interesting, technologies. And probably around 2014 or so, 2015, he started talking about Ethereum and kind of what that's involved. And early on, frankly, you get some signal and some noise from these blogs, but I started hearing more about Ethereum, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I started to kind of learn more about it.
I kind of think of crypto as like an internet with a native financial layer, which I just think is interesting for a lot of reasons, just for capital efficiency reasons, all the way to political reasons. And so I've just been a user and a sort of an avid fan for a long time.
Probably for me, it's more intellectual. I studied applied math and economics in school, went into tech afterwards. And then a lot of my interests were sort of the overlap between, finance and technology. So I guess crypto is sort of waiting for me in that sense.
Similar vein. Got a sort of finance background, physics background, machine learning background. And I kind of missed sort of the first bull run. I kind of looked at it and was doing something else, this bank. And then the second time around, I was like, oh, let's relook at this. And when I looked under the hood, I was like, oh, this is amazing, and fell in love with it.
I initially got into crypto pretty late, around like when Ethereum first came out. And I think like a lot of people, my first exposure was through Coinbase. And I got very excited by this concept of decentralized services and everything was going to get decentralized. Decentralized Uber, decentralized Facebook, decentralized Twitter. I think in theory, those ideas were exciting. But at the time, I think there was more idea than practicality. But it was enough to interest me to get into it. But I actually didn't work in crypto until like 4 or 5 years later, where DeFi summer started to take off. And for me, when I saw how much value was being moved in a permissionless way, that blew my mind.
I found out about crypto for the first time several years ago, right at like the early days of Bitcoin. I had a friend who was very active in these like Bitcoin communities, and he was also very interested in passive income. And so he'd set up his own mining rig, and he was telling me, hey, you know, I'm making an extra $200-300 a month. And at that time, it seemed very appealing to me to be like, oh, I live in like corporate housing. And so that's how I actually got into it. But I didn't really become aware of the utility of cryptocurrencies, aside from being able to mine it and sell it to people on the internet, until much later. I mean, when I started interfacing with NFTs and things around kind of the programmable economy, I started realizing that cryptocurrencies is more than just Bitcoin. It's more than just NFTs. It's more than just, you know, decentralized exchanges or DeFi. It's this technological opportunity where you can build things and have them just work through a decentralized network. And that's when things started clicking for me. And I started realizing that this is an opportunity to build something new.
My first brush with crypto, I was doing research in machine learning with a professor at Berkeley. And she happens to have a separate startup that does privacy in Cosmos. There's Dawn Song. And I ended up not working on that with her, but eventually graduated and went to work on ML research at Bridgewater and rolled eventually into the crypto team there. So I was trading some of the major tokens, ETH, Bitcoin, nothing small. But Bridgewater didn't really want to pursue that as a long-term strategy, nor did it want to explore DeFi. And that's what I was really interested in. So at that point, I started running a validator node and exploring some of the more technical intricacies, and eventually reverted back to doing some engineering in the space and left to start Stride.
She actually told me about crypto in 2014. I think we bought our Bitcoin when it was like $2,500 or $2,000. We still haven't sold. We also talked about building a payments company back in 2016-17 using blockchain. Didn't pan out. But we were always interested in blockchain. We closely followed it. And that's why this time around, it made sense for us to build, in blockchain.
As a user, I wasn't that early. I'm fairly old, but I only got into crypto in 2015. Long story short, there was this expert who came to chat with us, and he showed a slide where he was showing the protest in Ukraine, and they had this like QR code with like send crypto to support the people there. So, okay, that's fascinating. Like you can actually reach somebody like P2P all the way there. I had been working in payments and I thought that was interesting. And that is the moment that I decided to get into like buying my first tokens and so on.
I really didn't want to get into crypto because I came from traditional finance and I looked at this asset class. And back in the day, I didn't really know anything. I was like, this is all smoke and mirrors. Like there's no fundamental value to this. But then afterwards, being also a programmer as well, I just thought that the expanse of things you could do and the amount of like programming freedom and creative freedom that came with it was so valuable that I finally understood why people want to be in the space. And with that, I can understand the value it brings.
Our introduction to crypto came from the academic side of things. Like cryptography is this very humble, very discrete discipline. It relies on the bronze of mathematics above all else. And that was just really attractive, especially since before this, we were all doing AI research. And in that world, everything's very hand-wavy, very empirically driven. It was nice to revisit the concrete guarantees of proving systems and just like clever techniques. And now we get to marry both of those disciplines, and all the ways that their personalities are very different are exactly where kind of our business intersection is.